So something I've been thinking a lot about lately is adopting this sort of do it now mindset. Excuse me. I'm kind of, I think like a lot of people, I have a problem with procrastination and I tend to put a lot of things off. And, you know, I put off most things, like I find myself sort of working all day, but I feel like if I were to focus on getting these specific tasks done faster, I would spend a lot less time kind of bouncing around and I'd be a lot more productive. And so I've been doing that for a little while now. So I kind of wanted to share with you some of the results that I'm seeing from this. And so over a brief overview of what I'm talking about is like when you have a task that you generally put off, to adopt the mindset of like, I'm just going to get this done right now. I'm going to get it out of the way right now. And it's a pretty simple pretty simple concept, but it's harder to put it into practice, So, for me, I found that the more, and I read this in a book, it was called Get Things Done, if I'm not mistaken. And in this book, they talk about open loops. And so every task that you sort of put off and everything that you kind of like say, okay, I'm going to get to that later. And you try to store it in your memory, that like clogs up a lot of your brain power. And so they call them open loops. And he talks about, doing these kind of brain dumps where you put all of your open loops out on a piece of paper and then try to close as many loops as possible as fast as you can, just to kind of get your brain to sort of cleared up. And so for me, there's a lot of tasks that are, how can I put it? They're not even hard to do and they don't take very long, but I just don't like doing them. Like one of the examples is adding new employees to payroll. It's not that big of a deal. The employee fills out the paperwork and then I have to take all the information from that paperwork and add it to the payroll system. And I feel this huge amount of resistance every time that happens. And so I'll get the paperwork and I'm like, all right, I'll get this done. And then I'll just put it off until the very last minute. And so this was like the first time, the last time I was adding some people to payroll was the first time well, it wasn't the first time ever, but it was the first time on this sort of run of really taking seriously the do it now sort of mentality. And so I was going to grab the paperwork and I had it in my head. I'm like, all right, it's kind of early in the day. As long as I get it done, by the end of the day, it'll be fine. But as soon as I grabbed it, I'm like, fuck, man, why don't you just do it right now? Just get it out of the way. And so I just walked right in and, added all the stuff and got everything squared away and felt like a huge amount of relief. And so like I tried to keep that momentum going. So I started kind of like attacking some other tasks. Another example of this that I heard was from Jocko Willink on one of his podcasts. He was talking about how in his gym locker, he had all this stuff in there and there was no shelves in there. So like all the stuff was just sort of jammed in there. And so every time he would go to practice jujitsu, he would have to take all these things out to get the things he needed. And then he would have to put it all back in. And every day he would spend a few minutes kind of rifling through all of this shit. And he bought a shelf to put it in there. And then that would kind of solve all the problems, but he still put that task off. And so he continued to spend several minutes every day, pulling all the shit out and doing all these things and kind of working around the setup that he had. And then he finally said, fuck this, I'm going to put the shelf in. And it only took a few minutes to put the shelf in. And so the trade-off, and the same thing with the paperwork, is sort of the trade-off is like you're putting in all of this extra time that you're wasting kind of getting around the thing that you're putting off when you could just resolve the problem in a few minutes. And then you don't even have to think about it or you don't have to deal with that shit at all anymore. And so I think a lot of us have this, I don't know if I would call it a problem. It's just something that is, a lot of us deal with this, I would assume. And so things like the payroll paperwork, it just doesn't take that long. But the problem is the day that it's due, like the last day that I have to get it in order to get those team members paid on time. Every time that happens, I'm kind of like dreading doing this task. So all day I'm kind of dealing with that. It's not like plaguing me or anything, but it's in my head all day. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. I'll get to it later and all this kind of shit. So it's occupying some space in my mind when I could just take it. I mean, I don't even have to wait till the day that it's due. Like I could literally just, as soon as the team member fills out the shit, I should just put it in and be done with it. Have all the information in there. But I never do that. I'm going to start doing it now. But like that day was an example where I was like, fuck, I planned on putting this off, but I'm going to get it done. And so now my brain was free of that task. And so another thing that I do is the power list. And so, if you're not familiar with the power list, I've talked about it. You can look up Andy Frisella power list. I'll give you the very brief cliff notes of it, but it's 5 critical tasks every day that move your life forward. And what Andy talks about is when you finish your list, you're free for the day. You won the day. So sometimes the list takes all day. Sometimes it takes 12 hours. Sometimes you can get your whole list done in a few hours. And you can either maybe add to the list, which sometimes I do, or you can say, you know what, I've done my thing for the day and I'm going to kind of relax or something. And so for me, I always dragged out all of my tasks throughout the whole day. And so what that would end up looking like is I would do the stuff that I hated the least first, get that stuff out of the way. So now everything else on my list is shit that I don't want to do, but I have to do in order to win the day. And so any time that's between that task getting done, that whole time is occupied with that shit just living in my mind. Like, man, okay, I got to do this. I got to send this email or, whatever it is. Just sending a simple email is not one of the tasks. They're like critical tasks that move your life forward. So a lot of times it's like writing an email newsletter, which like I like doing, but at the same time, when it comes down to doing it, I often don't really want to do it. It's kind of weird. But so what I've been doing lately is I'm like, I can't do anything else. Obviously, if I have things on my calendar, meetings and stuff like that, I can do those things. But everything else, I can't do anything else until I get my shit done. So one big thing that I've learned is like, I can get so much more done in a day if I do things that way, because what ends up happening before I started doing it this way, I'd have all my tasks. And like I said, I would get the first, either the easy stuff or the stuff that I like doing. I'd get that out of the way first. And then I'd put all the stuff off that I dread till later. And, so the time in between, I was still working, but I was just doing like little weird, busy tasks that probably weren't necessary to do, So like, I felt like I was putting in a big, long day, but the reality is like the core shit that I really needed to do didn't take the entire day. And I learned this. I mean, I think I already kind of knew that, but I learned this really when I started doing it this way, when I'm like, all right, I just got to get this all done before I can do anything else. And so I would most of the tasks I do at my desk. So I would just be at my desk and I'm like, I'm not leaving until this shit's done. And I would get through my whole list and it was only like 12:30 in the afternoon or 1:00 in the afternoon. And I'm like, the fuck have I been doing with all of my time? If like, this is a normal list and I actually added some extra shit to the list, so like, it's not even a normal list. Like I kind of beefed it up a little bit because I'm like, I'm going to be going into like deep work mode and get this shit done. And I'm still finishing, maybe 12:30 is an exaggeration, but I'm finishing when the fucking sun is still out, which is like not normal. It's like 3:30 in the afternoon. And I'm like, well, what the fuck, man? Like, what have I been doing all this time? Like what? I haven't been spending my days nearly as productive as I should, because I'm not adopting this mindset of like, I'm just going to fucking hammer through all this shit. And so I don't know. It just, I feel like I need to maintain this. And I think it's something that everybody could do. I know if you have like a 9 to 5, then, you know, or whatever that is, you know, certain things you have to get done. And that's just, you know, you got to work around that stuff. And I totally understand. And so like on the weekends, I go into the shop and I work in the shop. So those days are a little bit different, you know, so I can get it that, you know, there's things in the way, but like any of those tasks that you're putting off, if you have the time to get them done and you just knock them out, like it just clears up so much space in your mind. And, you know, it just feels so much better. I mean, and I feel much more productive, and everything that I set out to do for the day is getting done. And I'm also really learning that I have a lot more capacity than I initially thought. Because if I'm just sort of like doing these tasks kind of willy nilly, like whenever I feel like doing it, and then in between those tasks, I'm doing all these kind of like busy work things that I could either hand off to somebody else, or maybe it's shit that people are already taken care of. And I'm in there like kind of checking customer support emails and stuff when it's not really something I need to do. Obviously, as a business owner, I need to kind of have my hands in things and look at stuff. But a lot of times I'm doing those things when I don't need to be doing them. They're already handled. I'm just kind of like in there, keeping myself busy, so to speak. And so, I don't know. This is a pretty straightforward concept, so I'm not going to just keep rambling about it. But I did want to close on something that I think is probably one of the most important things. And for me, if I have open loops that I know I have to get done that day, and let's say I'm just kind of like this doesn't really happen very often, but let's say, for example, I was just going to procrastinate and I'm like, I'm going to knock all my tasks out later in the day. Towards the end of the day, I'll just fucking hunker down and power through all of it. The problem with that is I don't really rest during that time. Like I have all of these things that I know that need to get done, and I know I'm putting them off, and that's adding a lot of stress. So like the time that I have before the tasks, if I'm putting off the tasks, that's not very good time. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but it's not time well spent. It's not restful time. It's time. My mind is still on all those tasks. So if you switch it and be like, I'm going to get all my shit done as, you know, as fast as possible. I'm not saying I rush through everything, but I'm just going to like sit at my desk or stand, whatever. It's irrelevant. Like I have a standing desk. But I'm going to stand at my desk until my shit's done. Then when my shit's done, I still have that same amount of hours free, but those are way better hours because I'm not thinking about those tasks anymore. They're all done. And I feel good because I got a win for the day and it's still light out, you know? And so sometimes I can add a couple more things out, or maybe I'll do a few more tasks, you know, because I have time. Or I'm like, you know, I could use a little bit of rest, and I don't really take days off. Like I actually don't take any days off at all. So I could work every day, but I'm trying to make it so that I don't work like full days every day, because I do understand there is some benefit to resting. So I guess that's it. To recap, I would just like to say adopting the do it now mindset, or, you know, I don't know. I guess mindset's kind of an overused word, but adopting that kind of way of living, I don't know. I have a ways to go to where I'm like really, like I could say I'm that kind of person. I'm just now really starting to take it very seriously. And I find my stress levels are quite a bit lower on the days that I actually pull that off. So it's definitely worth looking into if you have things you're procrastinating, or, you know, certain kind of tasks that you dread, but you know, they're not going to take very long. You just have to just get it done. Like you're going to sit there stressing about a task for hours, days, weeks. And then when you do the task, I think everybody's experienced this. When you do the task and you're like, fuck, that didn't even take that long, but it's occupied my mind for all this time. I could have just got it done and not had to have that shit in my mind this whole time. So I wish I wish I started doing this a lot younger. I'm 51, I think I would have accomplished a lot more had I done this but sooner. But either way, better late than never, and maybe this is the time when I needed it the most. So here we go. All right.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.